Hey everybody, it's Joel Kurtnitis, columnist for the Des Moines Register and host of the Right Moment podcast. I love getting feedback from you guys, and I've gotten some feedback over the last couple of weeks regarding the article that I wrote for the Des Moines Register, my most recent one, which was called One Child's Death Mourned, Another Celebrated. Let's dive into these and get some responses and see what we can talk about. I do love opening discussions, especially with folks who might disagree with me on some of these really important issues. So let's take a minute and look over them. The first article, or letter to the editor rather, that was in response to my article was from Michael May in Indianola. Michael, thanks for reading. I really appreciate you taking the time to reach out and get back in touch with me by this letter to the editor, and I want to do as good a job I can in responding to you. So, 3 questions for Joel Kurtnitis. The first that he brings up is you have widely publicized your refusal to attend the Iowa State Fair because you can't bring a gun ready to unleash deadly force as a first defensive resort to kill fellow Iowans. Okay. Please reconcile your claim to freely use deadly force at the Iowa State Fair with your attack on the humanity of the Texas woman choice to have a lawful medical procedure. Okay. So, boy, oh boy, where to even start on this? The gun issue is a red herring. It doesn't have anything to do with this. But you are bringing up a point that's often thrown in as a bit of a straw man, right? Which is equating aggressive violence with defensive violence. And it's an irrational comparison to make for several reasons. So when I talk about bringing a gun to the Iowa State Fair, I am not going there with the idea that I'm going to mow people down. It's just not in my plans, and not in anyone's plans who is a concealed weapon carrier. In fact, the group of people who nationally are concealed carry holders are actually statistically more law-abiding than law enforcement officers themselves are. So you really don't have anything to fear from those of us that are carrying weapons there. Now, you did use the word defensive in there, defensive resort to kill fellow Iowans, but you put it in quotes and you act like defensive doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter whether you're the murderer or whether you're the person defending themselves. I don't honestly believe that you think that's true. I don't honestly think that you see a moral equivalence between Pearl Harbor and Hiroshima. They're not the same thing. I mean, aggressive force and aggressive violence and defensive violence have always been two different things. That is the basis for law. So if you reject that, I think you might have broader ethical issues that you need to work through than just this relationship to abortion and to gun rights. I mean, they're unrelated issues, but if we're talking about defensive violence versus aggressive violence, they're two different things. To try to draw a comparison there doesn't make sense. So, oh boy. And then he says to attack on the humanity of the woman's choice to have a lawful medical procedure. The euphemisms always come out thick when we're discussing abortion. I mean, it seems like supporters of abortion don't actually want to talk about what abortion is. They want to keep hiding behind terms like women's health or a lawful medical procedure to make you think that we're just pulling teeth here. But it doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous, and we'll talk more about that later. The second question he throws out there is, how do you reconcile, quote, libertarian principles with a woman's right to govern her own body and stand on her right of conscience to have a lawful medical procedure? Again, notice the euphemism here. He doesn't want to talk about abortion, doesn't want to talk about dead babies or dead baby parts or Cecile Richards or the pan of arms and legs that the Center for Medical Progress showed in their expose. None of those things. All you'll hear about from abortion supporters anymore is lawful medical procedures. They're hiding behind these vague terms that they know normal people won't get, and that normal folks are unable to see past, I guess, when we're talking about this. So, but when it comes to libertarian principles, look, you're not going to find a major libertarian thinker who says that there shouldn't be murder laws. It's just not going to be there. You're not going to find a lot of libertarian thinkers who say that the government has no place in anything. That's not libertarianism, that's anarchy. They're two different things. So saying that we should have a limited government that defends our rights is in no way incompatible with saying that we should end abortion. Because those of us, especially those of us who are on the personhood side of the issue, we don't even want any new laws. We're not saying we're going to go ban specifically abortion. All we're saying is that murder is murder, no matter how small. So current murder laws, which we support, and I suspect you would support too, should be extended to everyone, regardless of age or stage of development. That's not incompatible with libertarianism in any way, shape, or form. Question 3. How do you distinguish your, again, quote, libertarian principles from those of an anarchist who believes he should be able to gun down anyone at the Iowa State Fair that threatens his security, yet would take away freedom a woman has to heed her own conscience in governing her own body? Well, again, I don't see how the gun thing ties in. There's really no comparison there. If I'm not shooting anyone, then what is your argument? And I haven't shot anyone. Concealed weapons carriers do not just go around shooting people for the fun of it. So I'm not seeing what your comparison is there. It's kind of a reach. But the second part of it, again, you're back to take away a freedom that a woman has to heed her own conscience in governing her own body. Well, if she were indeed governing her own body, I would agree with you. And libertarians are known for being a little bit more freedom-oriented on this, but we're not talking about the woman's body. So within hours of conception, this baby in question, which you would term a fetus, it doesn't make any difference. A fetus and a baby and a teenager, they're all stages of development in a human being. It's the same thing. So within hours, though, the baby has its own DNA, distinct from mother or father, often has its own blood type. This is not the woman's body anymore. At that point, every cell in your body has your DNA. The baby does not have your DNA. The baby is not your body. So it just doesn't make any sense to keep talking about like it's just the woman's body. Well, no, this is science. This is nature. This is how human beings are created, and it's not your body. Once there's conception, there's a new life there. And scientifically, everyone acknowledges this. There's really no question on this. You won't find a science textbook that says, hey, you know what, we really don't know how human beings are made or where they come from. They just sort of appear when they're born. Well, no, the baby is developing, and we've confirmed this for years and years now. So thanks for taking the time to reach out. Thanks for reading. I hope to dialogue more with you about this in the future. I'm going to move on to the next article now. The second letter to the editor is titled, How Do We Care for Unwanted Children? This is going to be great. I love talking about this one, okay? The article starts out, or the response starts out, Joel Kurtnitis and others who passionately argue that abortion is murder must answer a very basic question. How will we care for the children who are unwanted or unable to be cared for? I'm going to pause there for a minute because we really don't have to answer that. That's why I kind of love talking about this, okay? The analogy that I like to use is this. If you don't support taking care of every single homeless person in Des Moines in your own home, then you should support police shooting them all in the face. That's the same argument you're making. Unless you're ready to take care of every homeless person in Des Moines, you should be okay with killing them. Well, no. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? There's no equivalence there at all. There's no reason to connect those things. I believe that people have the right to live. I don't believe that anyone has the right to take another innocent life. So yeah, I don't really have to answer that question. Children will be cared for. There are tons of loving adoptive families who would love to have children. That's rarely discussed by proponents of abortion. Folks throughout history have started orphanages, have taken these children in, have educated them, have cared for them, and many of those children have grown up to change the world, regardless of whether their families wanted them or the situation of their birth. And it's an empowering message that every human being needs to hear, that it doesn't matter where you start. You still have the power to end up being great. And we deny that message, and we deny the inherent value and dignity of human life when we say, well, if nobody wants you, you may as well just die. And that's the case that's being made here. So no, I don't have to answer that. I don't have to care for all the unwanted babies to say that you shouldn't kill your babies. And honestly, in this case, the contradiction's even more glaring because you're actually defending what the parents in the Cone case. You are. I mean, you're saying, well, if you're not willing to care for the baby, then you should just kill him. Well, that's what they did, right? They didn't want to care for the baby, so they just let him die. Just denied him resources and let him die. So if you're angry about that at 4 or 5 months old, then you should be angry about that before birth as well, because a human life is being extinguished in both cases. I forgot to mention, by the way, this is by Barbara Dale in Decorah. And thank you so much, Barbara, for reading and for taking the time to respond. She goes into next, celebrated, this is from the article again, celebrated is surely too strong a word for the reaction to the abortion in Texas that he refers to. If you looked at some of the celebrity tweets that I linked to, as well as the ACLU and other ones on there, I don't think celebrated is too strong a word. I mean, just go look it up. I can affirm the wisdom of the woman who chooses abortion instead of bearing a child that will suffer and possibly perish after birth because she and or her loved ones cannot adequately nurture her or him. So to boil that down to a sentence, you should kill the baby before the baby dies. I mean, that's the logic of it. It's circular. So I guess I would maybe reconsider using that logic if I were you. The double standard may instead be that our society supports the woman who carries any pregnancy to term but fails to support her and the child after birth. This, however, is something that I do want to talk about, and I'm glad that you brought it up. There is a lot of times, I don't want to say there's undue importance placed on the right to life, because there's not. I mean, there's no bigger tragedy in America and nothing even close to abortion in scope. I mean, we're talking about 60 million plus babies have been killed since the Roe decision in the United States. That's a huge, huge, huge segment of our population that has been aborted before they ever had the chance to draw their first breath. So I'm not saying that there's too much importance placed on that, but what I will say is that whenever there is a challenge issued to care for unwanted children or to develop more options for people who can't take care of their kids, that is a call that we should respond to. And when I say we, I mean everyone in this case. If you're for abortion, if you're against abortion, it doesn't really matter. You should be interested in helping kids find families. You should be interested in helping people get on their feet. We need to take care of each other in this way. And historically, a lot of people have. But we need to get better at it. There's always a challenge there for that. But I also think that it's an excuse and it's a bit of a fig leaf to suggest that, again, if we can't take care of all the babies, then we should just kill them. That doesn't make any sense. So thank you for writing again. I'm going to move on to the next article. The next, this one wasn't a letter to the editor per se. This was an actual counter editorial that was posted, and it's by Aaron Davison Rippey, who it turns out is the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Voters of Iowa. Thanks for writing back, Aaron. I am happy to have the chance to start a dialogue with you and respond to what you wrote. So, I can't read this entire one. It's a little bit longer since, like I said, it's not a letter to the editor. But she claims that I'm making a false comparison in comparing the unborn child who was killed in Texas to the 4-month-old Sterling who was killed in northern Iowa. Again, there are several references here. Courts upheld her right to seek medical services. There's another euphemism. Legal abortion through the use of telemedicine. Okay. Access the medical care she needs. This entire article doesn't really talk about abortion except where it's forced to. Again, it's an onslaught of euphemisms. There's an onslaught of terms that what can we say to make people not think about a pan of baby parts sitting there in a lab? And I think it's dishonest. I understand why you do it. I mean, I understand the PR implications of having to say abortion over and over again. I understand the PR implications of, seeing a pan full of baby parts and in exposés about an organization that you're a part of and you're supporting. But let's be honest, it's an abortion. You're not just having a tooth pulled. You're not getting your gallbladder out. You're destroying a human baby. You're destroying a human life. And so if you can get out of the euphemisms, I think we can have an honest discussion about it and go into, okay, why should a woman have the right to go to an abortion doctor and get her baby surgically dismembered? And in this case, with the age of the baby in question in Texas, there was a surgical abortion. This was not just take a pill and the baby goes away. Not that that's any more moral, but in terms of the graphic and intensely brutal nature of it, it doesn't get much worse than this. I mean, the procedure that you're talking about is an abortionist going into a womb and physically tearing apart a developing human being and pulling it out in pieces. So that's what we're talking about. And I just really get tired of battling through all the the vague euphemisms that people throw up. Oh, it's just medical care. It's medical care. It's access to women's health care. Well, no, we don't care. Like that. Nobody is objecting to women's health care in any other capacity at all, right? You want to go get anything done you want to get done, go for it. Nobody cares. And in fact, a lot of people would be on board with subsidizing that. But if you're going to have sex and then try to get rid of the consequences of that sex by going to an abortionist and killing your developing child, yes, there's a problem with that. Not because it has anything to do with women's health at all, but because there's a baby involved and you're killing it. So anything else you want to talk about women's health care, that's fine. But let's leave it out of this discussion because it's not honest. So the woman who received an abortion in Texas was fighting for her basic right of access to legal medical care. I mean, and I would just challenge anybody who's listening to this, anybody who regularly reads these discussions on abortion, watch for these terms, okay? These are very carefully selected, legally shielded terms, okay? These are terms that people deliberately choose to draw your attention away from what's being talked about and point it towards something that everyone agrees on. Like, oh, see, we're just defending healthcare. That's it. I mean, you don't want women to die in a tent in a back alley, right? So, I mean, that's not what we're talking about. It's just dishonest to bring that up. There's all sorts of women's health care all over the country. In fact, 100% of places in America that men can go to and get health care, women can also go to and get health care. So, and there's a lot of them that don't serve men that are really oriented toward women. So there is no problem with women's health care. You have all the access you would ever need to women's health care in America in comparison to any point in our history. So let's drop the women's healthcare thing and talk about abortion, okay? So she goes on here to say, the case of the little boy in Alta Vista who died in the care of his parents is devastating and we mourn for him. It is clear something went tragically wrong. Well, in this instance, I have to correct you here. Nothing went tragically wrong. It wasn't like the house collapsed. He had evil parents who wanted to get out of the consequences of their actions and wanted to get out of the responsibility they had as parents, so they killed him. I'm legally obligated here to say allegedly, but the case is pretty clear from what we've seen. So, to compare this infant's, the article goes on, to compare this infant's death with the case of Jane Doe is intentionally deceptive. There simply is no moral or ethical comparison to be made here. Well, that's, logically you call that a mere assertion. She's asserting that there's no comparison to be made, but she doesn't go on to substantiate that assertion. And so what I would say is, yes, there absolutely is a comparison to be made here, and I made it. And that is that scientifically, there is no difference at all between a 4-month-old baby and a baby that is 5 minutes before birth. And if you can't make that distinction, then you need to, where does it stop, right? So if you can't make a distinction between a 5 minutes after birth and 5 minutes before birth, then can you make a distinction at 30 weeks? Can you make a distinction at 22 weeks when some babies have already been shown to be viable outside the womb? Can you make a distinction at 16 weeks when they start to feel pain? Can you make a distinction when the heart starts beating? Where do you draw that line? Where does a life become a life? And so that is what the comparison highlights, is the inability, the utter inability of your side to make the case for when life actually begins and make a coherent and scientifically based case for that. It's not there yet. There is no reason that the death of a 4-month-old baby should be mourned, but the death of a 20-week-old baby in the womb should be celebrated. There's no reason. Biologically, they are both still developing. We continue developing into our 20s. So if you're going to say that the developmental stage is a reason that someone shouldn't have the right to life, then where do you draw that line? Because you can go a long way in either direction. And so I'm pointing out by the comparison your inability to make that case. I would challenge you to make that case. And I believe that the reason that the pro-life movement is gaining ground in America, one of the predominant reasons that it is, especially among millennials and younger Americans, is that you can't make that case anymore. We've grown up with sonograms. We've tracked our own children's growth in the womb. We know that we're not talking about healthcare. We know that we're talking about a baby because we've seen it kick on film. So it's getting harder for you to make that case, and I think that's why there's the intentionally deceptive accusation that you've thrown at me in this, because you don't have any substantiation for your case at this point. So it just becomes a matter of who can call names the loudest. You move on to say, we most certainly support a person's ability to be able to make decisions about if, when, and how they become a parent, including Jane Doe. As part of that, we support the decision not to have a child, which includes their options for preventing or ending a pregnancy. All right, I agree with you. Everyone has a choice about when they become a parent. Everyone should have that choice. If you are denied that choice, that is a criminal act, okay? You should absolutely have the choice, every man and woman, about when you become a parent. The problem is, you make that choice when you have sex. That's when you make the choice. You're not talking about a choice. You're not talking about the choice to become a parent. You're talking about the choice of ending the life of your child and getting rid of the responsibility of the choice that you've already made. So again, I think there's a skewing here of what's being talked about and a confusion of terms, all right? Because you want to talk about choice, and everyone has that choice. But once you have made the choice, there are some choices in life that you have to follow through, you know? There's some that you don't get to back out of. And that is, again, that is the reason that the comparison with Sterling Cone works, okay? Now, they could make the exact same case that you've made here, Aaron. They could make the same case. Who are you to say whether it's right for me to be a parent or not? Who are you to say whether I'm ready to be a parent or not? Whether my resources should go to this child or not? Okay, but your response, and any reasonable person's response, would be, you already chose. You already chose. You had the baby. There he is. Don't kill him. Okay? That's the exact same argument that we're making. Again, this is a complete apples to apples comparison. It's the same thing. Okay? So they've already made the choice. You're talking about letting them get out of the consequences of their choice, which is a living human child. So if you're not ready to have a child, don't have sex. Don't get pregnant. You know, that's the responsibility that comes with it. And so we can't have a society where responsibility is left out or taken out on others for our decisions, okay? Everybody has the right to choose, but everybody also has the right to life. Thanks for listening in today. I will look forward to more responses from you, and I will talk to you again soon. Thanks.